is JS Party, your weekly celebration of JavaScript and the web. Connect with us on the Fediverse. We're JS Party at changelog.social. On Twitter, we're at JSPartyFM. And on YouTube at youtube.com/changelog, where we host our live shows, post clips and highlights from all of our pods, and other cool videos you don't want to miss. Special thanks to our partners at Fastly for shipping JS Party super fast all around the world. Check them out at fastly.com. And to fly.io. Host your app servers and database close to your users. Smart, right? Don't worry, no ops are required. Learn more at fly.io. Hello, JavaScript world. I'm Jerod, your internet friend, and the sound of those Breakmaster Cylinder beats means it's time once again for a JS Party. Today I am joined by my fellow panelist, KBall. What's up, man?
Hey, glad to be here.
You, sir, are an independent businessman now, aren't you? Want to give us a status update? I know on New Year's you talked about that, and you've been doing it a little bit now. You want to tell us real quick what you're up to on your day-to-day?
Yeah, so I am, and in fact, if you're listening to JS Party, you may have heard I'm even running an ad.
He is.
Talk about businessman.
Yeah.
But no, I've been working, coaching engineers and engineering managers, and it's been great. It's really fun to get to talk with folks and work with them and help them improve. And you know me, I love geeking out with tech people. And here we're mostly working on, like, if you're stuck, how do we work you through a non-technical problem? But it's just fun. And yeah, I'm working towards a new podcast that I'm going to be releasing a while in the future, but I'm doing interviews and I'm going to start putting those out on YouTube and working on all sorts of stuff. So it's good, but that's not the focus here.
No.
Here we're in JavaScript world, and I'm excited to talk with our guest.
Yes, we have here with us for the first time, hopefully not the last time, Erick Wendel. Welcome to the show.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. It's gonna be great. We're gonna be speaking about some low-level stuff, some research I was doing, and a lot of assumptions and studies I was doing here, trying to talk to people about how Node.js and how JavaScript actually works behind the scenes. So I think a lot of people, even beginners, will love this chat.
I'm excited to learn because this is an area of expertise that I completely lack personally. So ready to learn from you, Erick. So for those who don't know him, you are a Node.js core committer, keynote speaker, professional educator. You've got a great YouTube channel, bunch of stuff online helping everybody learn this wonderful world. And you're going to be speaking here soon at BEJS Conf, which leads us into our regular segment, Holla.
Can I holla? Can I holla? Can I holla? Can I holla? Holla, 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 holla.
Holla at how do you say it? BEJS? BJS? I've never had to say it before. The Belgian way of celebrating the JavaScript realm. It's a great conference, one I have not been to personally, but everybody who goes sings Omar's praises, who's one of the core organizers of this event. It's on May 12th in Brussels. Also online, Erick will be there, many other people as well. You can check it out at bejs.io/conf. And Omar was kind enough to hook us up with a discount code for JS Party listeners. Use code JSPartyTime for a 30% discount. That's for both real life meet space tickets and online tickets. And he also gave us 5 free online ticket codes that we can give away. So we'll be giving those away to our JS Party channel in the community Slack. Join there, it's totally free, jsparty.fm/community if you want to get one of those 5 free online tickets. So holla at Omar and his friends at BEJS Conf coming up May 12th. Erick, you're speaking at this conference. Have you been to it before?
Actually, I've been to Brussels, the best beer I've ever had. Actually,
Yes.
the biggest, I would say, too. So I'm really looking forward to see more places. I've been there just for a day, but it's a pretty nice city. Like the environment, people, it's very. I like my country. Like people are very receptionist. People really like other people, right?
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Well, I'm still excited to go there someday. I know Omar and I are still working on that behind the scenes. One of these days, we will connect those dots, and I'll be there in the flesh. But if you can't get there in the flesh, you can get there online. Definitely do that. Highly recommended. This has been Holla.
Hey, can I holler? Can I holler at you? Can I holler at you? Can I holler, 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 holler?
All right, let's dive into the nitty gritty here. So as you were saying before, Eric, you've done some serious research and put together a course or some training materials, trying to figure out and teach people about JavaScript runtimes, Bun, Deno, and of course Node.js, the one that I believe you have the most expertise with, teaching us how they actually work. And in order to do that along the way, I guess, kind of like how you could recreate one for yourself from first principles or from scratch. So we would love to take up this topic. Of course, this will be part of your topic at the upcoming conference that you're going to speak at. Can you get us started, maybe where you went down on this path, or what's the best way to teach people to get us all on the same page about this topic?
Well, I think the best thing about being a developer is because you get really curious, right? So I was trying to figure out some questions that was really hard to find on the internet, like how is a database driver made? Who makes it? Or even how JavaScript works, or what is a runtime, or what is different? What is the difference between Java and actually Node.js behind the scenes? So a lot of those questions I saw people actually complaining on the internet, and I saw a lot of theory about this. But in the end, I was like, this doesn't seem right. So I actually started contributing to the Node.js. I actually solved a really nice bug there. But I felt like I want to learn more about this tech, and I think I want to give a deep knowledge about this. So I asked actually ChatGPT back then. I was like, how is Node made? So what do I need to make? I don't remember if I did the same research for ChatGPT back then, but I know like for the researcher I'm now, I was doing the same questions. So it was pretty hard to find any resources about it. So I went to the Node.js on the V1 branch when like it was started back in 2009. And I realized the whole thing is, I would say, just, but it's not just, right? It's too widely to say just, but it's a proxy for V8. I think the magic back then in Node.js was the ability to get a JavaScript string sent to a C++ layer, and you could bridge. So you can say, when I call console.log, actually, I'm not calling console.log doesn't exist in JavaScript. Console.log is actually printf on C++. And for me, it was like, oh my God. So it's actually not JavaScript. It's other thing. So I was searching the same way on Bun and Deno, and actually they follow the same rule. So this leaves a lot of other questions, right? But in summary, something that actually blew my mind was like, oh, actually the best language here, we shouldn't like make any threats here, or fight for tags, because in the end is V8 is the Chrome engine, use it as a proxy to execute functions. So this is really interesting for me, and actually this leads to the other subject, which is recreating like React Native and other multi-platform applications that execute as JavaScript, but actually you can execute operating systems or mobile native APIs only using JavaScript, but it's not JavaScript.
So can we break down a few different pieces, right? So there's what are we talking about when we talk about JavaScript runtime? There's like how JavaScript, the language itself, is parsed and turned into executing instructions. And then there's like the libraries or the functions that are built in, which I think is what you're talking about in the terms of the proxy layer. And then there's like all the like memory management and that whole set of things. So which parts are in V8 and which parts are being implemented when you say you're a Node core developer? Like what are you doing there?
Nice. So the whole thing here, I'm gonna split in three different pieces. We have, I would say, the front end. So we receive a JavaScript code. We have V8 to interpret this JavaScript and make this C++ instances. So I would say, oh, when I have, I would say like a thread coming from the JavaScript language, I'm going to call the thread on C++. So in the Node.js core, my job today is we do some, imagine that I'm trying to consume some file. In JavaScript, we cannot consume a file. We have the V8, which is the interpreter and the runtime there that parse of this data and actually call the call another layer, the bridge, to call our operating systems, like on Mac or Linux and other stuff. To call this file, we have the third layer, which is the Libuv, that we can make async calls, and that's a lot of the runtime of the Node.js. I'm trying to summarize because I know a lot of people get a lot of not C++ previous background. But the point here is, what is the whole goal of the Node.js here is, if I'm a C++ developer, I know how to go in the core, I know how to save memory, to deallocate some variable, but I'm just a JavaScript developer. I know jQuery, I know a lot of like form handling. So how this could be accessible. So via this bridge, we can call like, oh, C++, just return for me the whole file buffer, which is the whole storage there. And I'm going to try handling this data on the JavaScript side. So this is, I would say the Node.js here is just a back and forth. I say, please, operating system, give me some data. And then on the JavaScript side, I'm going to run some algorithm to actually put in another layer so the user can consume. In the beginning, when you look at the Node.js core and how this stuff was working, actually, they were exposing everything. Like, oh, I want to say, like, I'm going to use the console.log. The console.log, we have the std out to receive a data or to actually throw some error. We have the std error. So we were exposing these functions. We have like a C++ call that received a variable and we were printing there. So in the JavaScript side, we're going to say, oh, I'm going to use console.something that is some function already declared on the C++ land. So everything that we have on Node.js right now is actually functions that were exported on the C++ side to make this thing. This sounds a bit confused when you just hear it, but when you're looking at the code, it's pretty straightforward. It's like, oh, I'm gonna call like something in English that is gonna make something easier from their side, but here in Portuguese is more accessible for me to handle this piece of data just using the language I already know, so I don't have to handle any memory. But just to conclude about the V8, in this case, all the optimizations that we have about the language, like for loops, the syntax and everything, V8 is doing behind the scenes with the V8, with Google, right? So in my side as a Node.js contributor, I barely touch the C++ side. I go on the high level APIs, like child processes or streams, just making this back and forth, but receiving this data from the low level and trying to make the life of users easier.
Okay, so let me see if I understand, because this is kind of blowing my mind a little bit. So essentially, all of the logic of how these different things are working is already implemented in V8, and what Node Core is doing, and also what Deno is doing, and what Bun is doing, is finding ways to essentially take data structures that live in JavaScript and functions that live in JavaScript, possibly mutate them a little bit so they'll work better in one way or another, pass them off to C++, get back what it responds, mutate it in a way that's going to make sense for the JavaScript caller, and pass it back up. Is that accurate?
Perfect. This is, yes. And so this leads to other questions, right? So this is just as simple as it seems why we have a lot of runtimes coming out, right? So what makes one of special than another? It's how they handle the data. So Bun uses now Zig, which is a programming language that's I've never seen before. It's even hard to read the docs. I don't know how Jerod was doing this. And they use the JavaScript runtime that runs on Safari, which is JavaScript core. So they say that it's faster, but for me as a software developer, it was pretty hard to try using this. Just to get some vocabulary, Node.js, the Deno, and like React Native and all this stuff, they are trying to embed V8. So this is one of the piece of the puzzle. So when you are saying data, we get back, but I was following a lot of the ban and how it actually is affecting Node.js right now. And they say, oh, we are consuming buffers, we are consuming strings, but if I put here, like I break this string in the middle, I can send it faster to the user land. So every runtime now are trying to adapt these algorithms to send data faster and actually easier to the user and safer to the runtime as well. So this is mind blowing for me.
Now, does that end up changing something about the user side API and how people have to interact with data? Or from a JavaScript developer side, it's plug and play, it's the same, and all of this changing in how you're buffering or streaming data around is below the level that I'm worrying about?
Well, I would say it depends on each platform. We have ECMAScript right now. So ECMAScript says, oh, this you should have on JavaScript. So in terms of language, but about APIs, every platform would choose whatever they want. This is why we have the Winter Working Group, which is a working group for those runtimes to share knowledge and say, oh, we built the new Stream API, which is faster than what is proposed for JavaScript. Let's try implement them all and let's try to make this a button. But I've seen like Cloudflare workers. I've never tried, but I've seen a lot of benchmarking. People are saying a lot of good stuff about them. But the worker threads and a lot of internal stuff would be different. Like they would implement as they want. This is what I was talking to. Like, oh, in Node.js we use printf, but they could use like Ruby or they could use Rust to print this differently, right? So they can implement whatever they want.
So let me see if I understand this correctly, at least with the big three that we know of. So Node.js is powered by V8. Deno is also powered by V8. And Bun is powered by JavaScript Core, which is a separate project altogether. And so V8 is maintained by developers at Google and probably open source other people. In JavaScript Core, this is a Safari thing. This is powered by Apple engineers, basically?
Sure, yeah. And it's pretty hard to embed. I don't know how they did. The docs is very hard.
Right, sure. Okay. So that makes sense. And so you also mentioned another moving part, which is Libuv, which you said allows for asynchronicity. Is Libuv then a separate thing from V8? Is it part of V8? Is it used by these other projects, or do they do something else?
Actually, V8 is Libuv is a library that was made for Node in the beginning.
Okay.
So Node.js, everyone says, oh, Node.js is not single-threaded, JavaScript is not single-threaded, but Libuv makes this a very powerful abstraction and good thing. So it's an external library, so you can install on C++. On this video I did, you have to compile them all. I think both Deno, Bun, and Cloudflare workers uses Libuv in the same module. I'm not sure, 100% sure of if they are using this as well. But the good point here is we can schedule tasks for the operating system. So every different operating system, they handle tasks like differently. On Windows, you can call threads from a way. You can like create a new process in a way, in a Mac in another way, and following. So the Libuv makes the process easier to make multi-platform of this. So you can call internal APIs from every different operating system from there. I'm talking this because you could actually use only C++ threads if you want and handle motexes and there's a lot of crazy other concepts by hand. But Libuv makes this even easier to make everything. So we have the JavaScript layer. We have the C++ that I usually call the controller, which is the intermediate between the Node.js, the C++, the Libuv, and the V8. So we are sending a string from JavaScript to C++. The V8 parse this JavaScript string to C++ classes. schedule background tasks, schedule timers, threads, or whenever they want for the operating system. And then when the operating system finishes, it calls back the V8, we calls back our C++ function, which calls back our JavaScript function. So this is wonderful for me how it was working. Like, yeah, it's nice.
It's a relatively thin layer. Now, there's a large API surface with Node and with these other runtimes. So while it's a thin layer, it's broad, meaning it has a lot of surface. And so that's why it's still a lot of work, right? So you might wonder, like, well, maybe Node isn't a big deal. Well, it's a lot of code, right, and a lot of surface area. I did look up while you were talking. It seems that Deno is using Tokyo, which is a Rust package for async IO, which is one of the differences between Deno and Node. So just trying to Google while you're talking so we can.
Nice.
I know you're just going from memory. So, okay. KBall, you have thoughts before we move on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting point of. So we've been talking a lot about the different. There's been a lot of buzz in the community about Bun, it's so fast, it's doing this, and Deno is pushing this and doing that, and that sort of mentality of these are places where there's a lot of competition and differentiation happens is almost, it feels a little at odds with the view of these as they're thin proxy layers. So I guess the thing that I'm like trying to wrap my head around is what are the dimensions on which these different runtimes are competing?
I think there's a lot of like gossip around this as well, right? But I think right now it's because like Deno came trying to help on Node with a lot of other stuff we had, like package managing. We like Randall was talking, this is something that we should change. And I think the whole thing right now is because Node is so big. It's more than 10 years. It's so big that it's hard to like, let's introduce some break change. We don't have some freedom to implement more stuff. Like in Deno, I'm gonna change from JavaScript to use TypeScript, so users they could be of using more tools and everything. But in my opinion, this movement, let's create a new runtime and all of stuff, it's because it's going. I don't know if it's gonna sound bad, but for the community, it's a good hype that is pushing forward all the runtimes. Because of Deno, Node.js has been improving a lot in performance ways and a lot of other approaches. But I have no idea how they are working because it's not so. We haven't seen in conferences. I think it's very small right now. But I think in the future we will not think about like I'm using Bun or I'm using Node. We're gonna have a JavaScript runtime in every cloud as they like, because when you are talking about Rust and C++, they are world are different, right? So we could easily make a mistake on C++ or forgot some memory handling, and in Rust they try to fix this by the approach of the language. So for like AWS, Google, or Microsoft, I would say it should be easier to handle or to control these barriers when deploying this kind of functions. So I would say they are trying to go to some like standard. They are trying to make, I would say, the same thing, but they are pushing like, I'm your friend. We are trying to run together, but in the end, we are trying to compete because there's space for everyone. But for me, it's gonna like in some point, everyone's gonna be just in one side, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you look at the three that we're talking about, KBall, it seems that Deno is using, it's Rust instead of C++, but it's still V8 at its core. So it's using more similar things to Node and really competing on API design, implementation details, the way the user experience and performance and those kind of things. Bun seems to be more of a desire to be a drop-in replacement for Node. So whereas Deno, of course, they famously added support for NPM and stuff recently, but it didn't even have NPM support for a long time. So it's really much like a clean break. Whereas Bun is trying to be like, hey, what if you just take your Node app, swap out that dependency of Node for Bun, and not change a single API call, and it's whatever X faster or more reliable or whatever. That's Bun's goal, it appears, at least for now. And the way they're going about that is saying, well, no V8, right? JavaScript core and no C++. Okay, we're going to use Zig, which us normies can't even understand for some reason. It's that hard. It's that cool. And I mean, in terms of like what the competition looks like, it seems like those are the things. And it's really implementation details then that matter. It's like, well, we implement this using libuv and you don't. And Tokyo is better for these reasons, for this use case. And us users are just kind of like, okay, I guess I'll wait and see the benchmarks or which packages, which ecosystem has the packages I need. Like that's a pretty important part of it.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, like what you're highlighting with Deno, right? Like the differences are not in the code you're writing so much. I mean, maybe a little bit, but it's the things around that. And like particularly the security, I think I remember that Deno has an ability similar to what actually the Towery folks were talking about, where you can say, I only want to expose these system APIs and therefore kind of lock down, even if I'm pulling in NPM packages from wherever, I know that if I have not given file system access, doesn't matter if somebody inserts some random file read over there, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. One of the downside or one of the bummers about that KBall is actually a lot like something you talked about a couple weeks back with tree shaking. When we all got excited about tree shaking, and then we realized that most of our apps need most of the code most of the time. And you're like, well, we tree shook it, but not much fell out, and that's kind of was the reality.
You just give all the permissions, like the apps on the...
With a significantly complicated Deno app, you're going to need all those things. And so because it's at the executable layer and not like package by package, which is just a constraint of the technology today, like they just actually can't do it any more granular. There's people working on that with like Shadow Realms, that you kind of have to give it most of the things. And so at the end of the day, it's kind of like, well, it's philosophically the opposite of Node, right? And with regards to security specifically, but in practice, okay, for a very constrained application, then it's different. But for a broad, general web app or whatever that's doing lots of things, you're going to kind of have to give it all those things anyway. So that's a bummer, but just where we are.
You're going to get the return of microservices, right? I'm going to separate my app not because it makes sense for what I'm trying to do, but because it lets me pinpoint my security pieces.
Right. Draw boundaries. Finally, a good argument for microservices. No, just kidding.
And actually, there's a very good post about how James Nels actually wrote a whole article speaking about the security and how Deno made. And actually, it's a very, very close point. Like, oh, I know you can use a lot of this stuff, but in the end, sometimes you want to fix this problem using some infrastructure around this.
Yeah.
So everything like on VPCs and all of this, it's rarely when you go to the application. But again, I would say Deno was only able to do this because they were beginning they have like freedom to do this, right?
Sure.
In JavaScript, in Node.js, in the real time, it's a bit harder to touch this word. So I don't know.
Right. I joke a lot about people who write modern software, because that's one of the selling points. Like, this is a modern library. And really what that means is you just didn't start it very long ago. Okay, it's modern because you just started it last week. But actually, Node has been out there serving millions of users for many years and continues to do so. And so it can't actually go modern in certain ways because it has dependencies. And I'm not talking about NPM packages, like actual real humans depending on it. And that's the luxury of new things. Is like, yeah, we can start fresh and we can drop all the old stuff. And we need to do that in order to learn and grow and innovate. But, the big dog is still feeding the family, right?
Well, and you notice that as they start to go along, they discover, hey, some of those things we thought we could drop, people actually care about them, like package management.
Yeah, that's true.
There's one thing that I've seen people like avoiding using, like ECMAScript modules. ECMAScript modules, for me, it's the next level of JavaScript. Because now we can have like this single file working on the front end, on the browser, on the Node.js, in all those runtimes with the same language without, like in Node we have required, but what if in Deno we could have like another kind of import? So this for me is a very game changing for every application here. The bug I solved in the Node.js core it was actually because of this. Everything was working fine. We using CommonJS, using Require. But for me and for students that I've been teaching here, I teach everything like trying to use the latest version, the latest JavaScript always. So I was always using ECMAScript. But I've seen the community is not so widely using this. So some things are breaking right now, but we haven't seen much impact yet because people are not changed because maybe either they are afraid or it's close too much to TypeScript. I've heard these words. Oh my god. But yeah, for you who's listening and you're not using ECMAScript modules, this is crazy nice for all your applications because now it's truly asynchronous. Now you can share your code without using like Webpack or other mediate, right, to create and make a single code to run in different platforms.
Vague performance reviews, awkward manager one-on-ones, mysteriously denied promotions. Growth doesn't have to be fuzzy. With KBall's structured growth process, we'll make it crystal clear. Together, we will identify your goals, highlight your strengths, and craft a path to the role you deserve. Because you deserve more than you're getting from work. kball.lsc/growth.
So if we're going to go back to the beginning a little bit, and I was going to ask you, Eric, as a interested developer, if I wanted to code up a Node.js, from first principles, from scratch, what would my first few steps be? Now, I know step one could be go watch my YouTube video on how to do this. But assuming that we don't have that much time and detail, and you're audio only, like what would be like the starting point for people who are like, yeah, I'd like to give it a try, just to learn? What would they do?
The first step for me was trying to search examples on GitHub. So I found some people trying to using V8 alone, just get a string, parse it, and print out. But it was very hard because we need the environment. We need to compile the V8, and the docs for me didn't work well. But I would say for any technology or anything I'm gonna start looking at right now, I'm gonna go to the GitHub and search if someone is doing something. So I would say the Node.js docs is very good teaching the whole life cycle. So how JavaScript callbacks is handling. I would say it's even too much information sometimes. Like we were talking about Libuv, but actually, Libuv doesn't matter much for us JavaScript developers because they are handling operating systems, and if we touch that level, we should learn how the systems works. But I would say get each individual piece. So I know right now what V8 can do and cannot do right now. We don't have set timeout. We don't have set interval. We don't have set immediate. Everything that goes outside, everything that's I would say asynchronous there, that's gonna be executed in the future. It's not the paper of the V8 right now. Everything that is asynchronous in Node is Libuv. So now, in my case, I ran to the GitHub of the Node.js there, and I noticed that in the beginning, Randall wasn't using Libuv. It was libio, I would say, that only worked in Linux and a few operating systems. That's why they built the Libuv. Once you learn the Libuv, and once you learn the role of the V8, you start wondering, okay, how can I integrate them? So you can use Rust, you can use other programming languages, but I would say sometimes that we're gonna feel a bit frustrated. It's not about the language, it's not about the APIs. It's making this whole environment. This is why we were talking, watch my video, not because only the content, because I built the whole ecosystem for you on the Git pod there, so you can just start using right away. You can actually implement challenges and other stuff. So yeah, learn every piece individually and try understand what you could do and you cannot do in every piece.
When you say you build the whole environment on Gitpod, real quick, KBall, when you say that, what do you mean by that?
Well, I went there, I downloaded V8 and compile and get the binary. Libuv, same thing, and now I'm sharing so everyone can code on in the cloud, implement C++ code and everything from that environment, and you don't have to worry about environment, which I suffered at least a month to make this work. So it's crazy.
Eric suffered, so you don't have to. Just go use his Gitpod. KBall?
Riffing on that for a sec, I think we as JavaScript developers sometimes forget how challenging it can be when you're building from source code in a compiled language in a new environment. Like that in and of itself can be a month-long odyssey.
Right.
So there was something you said that made me realize I was unclear on where the lines are of what V8 offers you. Because you said, okay, you don't have set interval, you don't have set timeout. And I was made me realize, like, okay, what exactly is V8 versus something that Chrome or Node or whatever is providing? And I'm guessing now it has to do with what's in the JavaScript spec versus what's a web UI versus or API versus what. But like, is there a clean line that you can draw for us there?
Well, we could go to the ECMAScript.com website and the docs, like what are variables, loops, structures, classes, promises. Oh, this is for me, was mind-blowing. For me, promises are async functions that can be used to notify you of something that executes in the end. So I was like, this is not V8 because V8 cannot handle anything like in the future. We actually have one, which is kill microtask, but it's so specific that I don't mention much. But there, in the end, a promise object is just a wrapper for a callback. So you just have an object that when the C++ calls you back, then you can have that object changing. So that object lives on V8. So as far as I know, I don't know like everything because I'm still learning a lot. And just a parenthesis here. To make this project work, I actually reached out the Google team. I reached out some Node.js developers, and they had no idea how to make this from scratch. So it was crazy. So I actually found a guy who worked at the Node Source with me, and he used to work at the Libuv and the V8. He joined me on a call and helped me out. So I would make work just because of him. So I would say the limit for V8 is the language itself. I would say the syntax abstract tree, I would say the cons, how they interpret the variable, how functions is being executed, and just it. Just it. It's a bunch of things, right? But it's hard.
Right. Does that help, KBall?
It does. Well, and it once again shines light on how large the Node project is because
Right. That's what I was saying. Surface area. Like there's lots of things it needs to provide.
there's a lot of things that need to be implemented that is not necessarily just a simple proxy over to V8, right? Like, how do I deal with an async function and dealing with that? Well, it sounds like the way you do that is you use libuv and you call out to that layer of C++, but that had to be written. Like the original Node, that was part of the development. Now it's there, we can just use it. But all of these things that, I mean, and this highlights an interesting thing, right? You start developing JavaScript, and even now with Node, since it provides all this, the line of what's a language and what are functions that we have all kind of agreed upon that are in a different spec. They're not part of JavaScript, even though everywhere you write JavaScript, you could depend on them being there. Like it's not something that most of us have in our heads.
Yeah. It for me it was crazy. I was the V8, when you go to the docs, they have some tutorial there, and they said you can use D8 with D. And it's like a shell code that you can try like using the evil. Actually, it's, I don't remember the name, but yeah, it's on the console you run, and I was using console.log. Console.log doesn't exist. I was like, what? So they implemented print just to show you that it doesn't exist in V8. So it's it's nice. It's wonderful how technology works. And this is what I talk to people. We shouldn't fight of technology if P2P or JavaScript is better, because in the end, is the C++, is the machine code doing everything for us. So we should learn how these things work behind the scenes so we can make our abstractions better, right?
Right. I mean, it's just amazing as, JavaScript browser, front end, back end, whatever we're doing, developers building applications for customers, libraries for our fellow colleagues, whatever it is, like how high up we are on the shoulders of the giants, and how we're so high up that sometimes you can't even see the ground, and we need somebody like Erick to come by and spend a month setting up the ground so that we can even stand on it, which is really just a privilege. And I think speaks to the importance, even though we're standing on these shoulders, to be able to look down and see what's going on down there. Really makes it less scary, demystifies, empowers us to build better, smarter. And so there's a reason, even though you shouldn't have to learn this stuff. And, I would argue that for many people, they never do, and they don't have to, but you will be a better developer. You will be a more confident developer if you can see how the parts underneath you are put together. And like KBall and I are learning right now, like certain aspects. So I guess it's just a sales pitch for this kind of content. I know that a lot of times when we're looking at continuing education for ourselves, it's like, how can I learn the next new framework, the next new CSS trick, or whatever it is to make my apps better? And that's all well and good. But also, like, not just going out, but going down and learning what's underneath you is really empowering.
One thing that for me was, I won't say the most interesting, because everything was like, I was like a kid in the kindergarten. I was like, this is so nice. But the way, because we were talking about Libuv being the single threaded, like how they handle the events, how they synchronize, so we won't have any like threading problem, like thread safe and this kind of stuff. We don't usually speak when we're working with JavaScript, because the Libuv handle this. However, we should have some storage, right? Because I'm delegating some function, and this function is going to be stored somewhere. But I'm talking about many of like millions of users concurrently accessing my application, and this is being stored in somewhere, right? So I was like, oh my God. So still this is fast, still they know how to handle memory in like it's so few people that know about V8 and this kind of thing, that usually it's the same person. When you go to the conferences, when you speak to people at V8, you see there's the same like 10 people or 20 people
Right.
that knows that the thing works. So it's crazy nice, but still, in my opinion, as an instructor right now, everyone should know, everyone should be able to help to improve this technology, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the giants are tall, but they're also few.
Yeah.
And you find out once you get down there, you're like, oh, the V8, how many people are on the V8 team? And it's like 6 or 8 or I don't know, a dozen, but it's just not that many people. And it's like, wow, these 6, 8 or a dozen people pretty much power everything that powers the ecosystem. And so it's just really interesting how we go from like this, the top end side of app developers and users is like millions. And then as you get down to the dependencies further down, there's just like, one lonely dev in Nebraska maintaining these things, for example.
And for you who are watching right now, you might be thinking, oh, maybe ChatGPT knows, right? No. When you go there and you try making specific questions about V8, they don't know. The code doesn't compile, and it's hard. Sometimes I was wondering how those people are maintained. I don't know. I don't have this information, but I'm not sure why this docs private at Google, or why it's not so publicly. When you go to the docs, you can see like the old docs that goes only on the signature. You see what is the input and the output, the function. But what if you want to convert a function, convert an integer, a string to an integer? In my case, oh my God, I was searching at the tests. So I got to the whole thing. I was searching, say, oh, maybe I see something how to use because of the error that was showing to me. So it's pretty hard, but I don't know why this is not so accessible for everyone, right? Maybe it's a reason, but I don't know.
Well, speaking of things that ChatGPT doesn't know, I just broke it yesterday. I asked a
Ooh.
question. I was like, how do I do this? It was like function parameters, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, try this. And I looked at it. I thought, oh, wow. I didn't know you could do that. That doesn't look right, but I guess you can do it. So I went and copy and pasted it. And I was like, and it broke. And I went back to ChatGPT. I'm like, no, you can't do that. Here's what happens. And it says, oh, I'm sorry about that. I messed up. Here, try this. And it gave me the exact same code. I'm like, oh, I found a loop here. It's just going to keep telling me the exact same code, even though it's broken.
ChatGPT is an amazing technology in an even more amazing hype cycle.
Yes, the hype cycle is strong right now.
It can do a lot of really powerful and cool things, but it ain't AGI.
Yeah.
No, and we humans are very good at cherry picking the best examples and putting them on social networks so that we get lots of retweets and likes.
But for me, well, I'm curious, right? For everything, like, oh, why is my webcam green now? Why is this? I try to make a lot of questions. And sometimes this question is like 1 a.m. So I go to like ChatGPT, how to make a web driver from scratch. Like right now, I'm trying to do the same thing I did for Node, recreating Node, but I want to do on the mobile devices. So I was like, maybe the idea is the same, but do they use Libuv to make the stuff? I don't know. The mobile seems not so powerful in processing power and this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, I was searching there. Every of those platforms, they are using C++ or like bytecodes to make those bridges. So you can call native APIs from Android, from iOS, the same way we are doing on the desktop. So this is how native scripts or React Native, they are doing behind the scenes. But again, I'm already like a week working on this and I couldn't set up the environment. This is so hard. Yeah.
Oh, even harder, probably. Yeah. So that's your next video is going to be how to recreate React Native from scratch, or what's it going to be?
Well, I wouldn't say the next because I've already been spending a lot of time on this, but I want to like for this conferences, I'm going to speak about this recreating Node in a lot of conferences, and I would put like as a plus. Oh, look, you know how to make like an input on your Android. This is how we can do the same idea, but it's a bit harder because in my case, I don't know Android and I don't know iOS. So, and I'm not an expert on C++. So you can see a lot of bad practices on my code because I'm just like some people like try and find answers, right? So this is a bit harder for me, but I don't give up easy. So
And I feel like that's actually a key to becoming a good developer and to going deep and all of these things. Is like
Yes.
once you get outside of the domain, it's going to be hard. There's going to be dead ends. There's weird esoteric knowledge that somehow has not made its way into the documents or into ChatGPT or into whatever else you're using to teach yourself. And you're going to get stuck for a while. And you got to like not give up too easy and keep banging your head and try changing your question or your search phrase until you figure out what is the weird thing that somebody's documented in a blog post that wasn't picked up by whatever that gets you past that barrier.
It's kind of like a video game. You know, there's kind of two kinds of video game players. There's the ones who get stuck and they're like, this isn't fun anymore. I'm here to have fun. I'm going to move on. And I totally understand that because that's logical. Like if the goal is fun and this isn't fun, why am I doing it? But then there's the kind of video game player that I am where it's like, oh, I'm stuck right here. My life is going to be hell for the next 7 hours until I get past this level. And I'm just going to go over and over and over until I get past it. And sometimes I feel like programming has been like that for me personally, where I'm like, I'm just stuck. I don't know my way out. Most of this is pre-GPT tooling, right? Pre lots of helps. And I'm like, well, it's me, you, and the keyboard here. Let's bang our head on it until we finally figure it out. And it sounds like you've persevered through some of that yourself, Eric, and getting this thing out there.
yeah, in my case, there's always some voice here. There's a reason because why anyone hasn't done anything that you are trying to do, right? Like my video on recreating Node, there's no content on internet.
Right.
So this is why I'm building like blog posts, making a lot of stuff to try to get more people. But like when you're the first, this is very nice. Like, oh, I was the first mad science. I implemented the WebSocket protocol using JavaScript from scratch, like binary data and a lot of stuff because I was making questions. And this is very nice when you reach the point. But the path, oh my God, you think like I'm gonna give up at some time. Your mind like, no, you shouldn't do. You have a lot of other stuff to do.
Right. Well, I guess as a fellow content creator, then let me ask you a question about that. I guess all three of us here are people that create stuff for the internet. You have this video, we'll put it in the show notes. It's the one that we've been talking about the whole show. It's an hour and 25 minutes. It has chapters and stuff. It has like all the things, right, that a polished video should have, and literally months of work, right? Literally before you could even start recording. When you're making something like that, do you ever just stop and say, like, what if nobody cares? Like, what if nobody watches this? I mean, you've done a great job. It has 123,000 views. So, I mean, massive success on that front. So that's amazing. Got to feel good. But do you ever wonder, like, what if I put, because a lot of us do put things out into the world and it's like, meh. And you're like, dang.
It happens almost like every time with me. But I notice sometimes I try creating. Actually, right now, I'm more trying to balance. Like, this is content that I love to do. This is something that I really like doing. I know that's not going to be hype. Advanced stuff. This is actually my story here producing content in Brazil. Everyone else is trying to teach beginners and intermediate developers, but I see a limbo. So from the advanced or from the intermediate to advanced and specialist, there's no one speaking because it's hard to put people in like my marketing team. They say, no, these guys didn't buy, like those people don't buy courses. I was like, let's try out. I want to check this out. I want to fail, but I want to fail fast. But in this case of the recreating node, it was something so interesting for me that even if it was only me, I was like, "Oh, mom, come here and see what I did." So this is kind of like I remember being at bar, having like some caipirinhas, some drinks, and I showed like the GitHub on my phone. I'm like, did you know that JavaScript doesn't have console.log? They don't have the set time out like a mad scientist.
This is like your opening line at a bar.
Yeah. So I would say I'm getting paid now to study, like I'm getting paid to research, like being like a content producer. So sometimes we fail. I build a video like recreating, like asking how people create a code coverage tool. Is it from JavaScript or how does it work? I published it, like you can see the views is so loud, but I don't even care. I don't know
Right.
that it was the purpose, right?
Well, that's the right attitude right there.
Do you feel like you have a sense of when something's going to go or not? Because I was just talking with somebody about this and they're like, yeah, I had one that went really well. So now can I just like take that? And I'm like, every single thing I put out there, I don't know if it's going to go or not.
Right.
And there have been things where I was like, this is going to go. And it's like nothing. And then I've had things where like I threw this out in response to somebody's question and it took me an hour to write up in more detail, and I threw it up there and it's still generating hundreds of page hits off of Google every day. And I'm just like, really? Like that's what's going?
Right.
I have a formula right now that is every day I publish a text, like it's like 2,000 characters on LinkedIn. And this is, I would say, like my school. So I publish there, and if it goes viral, like 1,000 likes more, I know this was a validated content. So from there, I actually push forward and I create a YouTube video. So when this goes viral on YouTube, I get this and I publish a blog post and create a talk to submit at some days. So the whole point for me is try to fail fast. But as you said, sometimes I'm really tired sometimes. We cannot be creative every day. So sometimes I was like, oh, I'm gonna just say whenever I had from some experience, like 5 tips, I suffer, you shouldn't suffer. This goes hype. It was like, oh my God, I I didn't push I didn't put the enough energy there and it goes like viral. So sometimes
Right.
goes as we don't expect. I would say the constancy and publishing every day is what makes our life easier.
Right. We can't control the outputs. Like we can't control the results, but we can control our inputs or our own personal outputs. So focus on both quality and consistency has been my formula. More than quantity, I mean, consistent with a quantity is a good thing, but just focus on doing things that you think are good and have a thick skin when, the thing that you really thought was awesome, goes out with a dud, and then just be genuinely happily surprised when things do manage to land. And that seems to carry us through, but it can hurt your feelings a little bit when you put a lot of work into something and it doesn't seem to do what you were hoping it does. I don't know if it hurt your feelings is the way to, it just disappoint, I guess. Okay, we're coming up at the end here. Any final thoughts, Erick or KBall? Anything else we want to talk about today before we call it a show?
Oh, just that about this last piece. If you are thinking to build content, sometimes take a break. Don't push too much at the beginning because it's so stressful. You don't make enough money sometimes. You get a lot of haters. Like as you are growing and you have a lot of people say, oh, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But you can see that the amount of the haters is very low compared to the people that you actually help. So educating people and actually sharing what you are in your mind would help a lot of other people. So this is really nice.
Well said. KBall, last chance. Say something before the show's over.
I love what Erick just said, right? Like our tendency as human beings is to focus on the bad. So whether that's the piece that didn't go, that just like you published it and it was dead silence, or the one hater who's out there saying, this is wrong, this is terrible.
Right.
I think all of us, like that's where our emotions get caught up. And it's easy to overlook all of the people who read it and were like, this is great, and never said anything. But there's a lot of those out there. And so, yeah. I think it comes back to the same thing you're talking about with development, right? Like push through, be stubborn.
Right.
Dang it, I'm publishing for me as much as for anyone else. And you never know. This is the last thing. You never know where someone impacted. I had somebody reach out to me a week or two ago that was like, he's an entrepreneur. He's had multiple companies. And he said, I don't know if you remember me, but I share your blog post from a decade ago with every company that I work with. And would you like to reconnect? And I was like, mind blown, right? Like this is, right. I don't even know if that blog post is still alive. It was on like an old site, like it's that old, right? I had no idea. And you have no idea which of the things that you wrote changed somebody's trajectory and they are like going off and then or you recorded on YouTube or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it does happen. Like people see your stuff and it can change their lives. And so don't stop writing or publishing or whatever it is because of some hater.
Yeah. Just to pile onto that, I will say celebrate your wins, no matter how small, even in development, you get past that one thing and celebrate that win, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe it's just a step back and play a favorite song, or maybe you're going to go out for a beer or ice cream, or maybe you're going to take a day off, whatever you're going to do. But celebrate those wins because they really do power you through the downward parts, right? The struggle. It is toil. Both we're talking about software development and content creation, and really anything that you do in life that's worthwhile is going to have some toil. And so if you can celebrate those wins, the big ones, the small ones, then you can kind of, get through the doldrums on the other side. Speaking of doldrums, we're coming to the end of our show. It's beginning to tail off. Erick, where's the best place to connect with you on the internet?
Well, I would say follow me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the best one. But if you want to chat like directly with me, maybe Twitter, because I reached the friendship amount there and I have no idea how to delete, and LinkedIn is so messy for this. But Twitter or Instagram, I'm very accessible, but I'm busy as well, so don't be sad if I take a week to respond, because it's been crazy. You see, the content's crazy. But right. I always try to give some advices, and actually sometimes I don't know the answer, but I know how to link to other people as well.
Very good. And if you want to see Erick in the flesh and you happen to be in and around Brussels in May, check out BEJS Conf. One last shout out to our friend Omar and that conference, which I've heard only good things about, which as a conference organizer, I know feels good, because they have the same struggles that content creators have, as well as that one hater who leaves a bad review. Don't be that guy or gal. Don't be that one hater. Anyways, let's call it a show. Erick, appreciate you coming on. KBall, always appreciate you. I'm Jerod. This is JS Party, and we'll talk to you on the next one. to the next pod yet, Changelog++ members. You have 6 minutes of bonus coming right up. Did you know Erick has over 90,000 followers on LinkedIn? He was gracious enough to answer my prying questions about how he thrives on that particular social network after the show ended. And if you aren't a ++ member,
what are you waiting for? A graved invitation?
ditch the ads, get closer to the metal with bonuses like this one, and directly support your favorite developer pods. We are your favorite, right? Don't you dare say syntax. Check it out at changelog.com/++. Thanks again to our partners Fastly and Fly for helping us bring you JS Party. Check them out at fastly.com and fly.io. And to our beatmaster in residence, the mysterious BMC. Our beats are bumping because BMC bumps out the beats. Say that 3 times fast. Next up on the pod, we discuss the latest web dev news, GitHub Copilot X, TypeScript 5.0,
his beloved TypeScript,
and the state of React. Stay tuned right here. We'll have it ready for you next week.